Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amherst Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut League of History Organizations, and I want to welcome you to our May Colleague Circle. Can you believe it is May already? I certainly cannot. Where we're going to be talking about what reopening looks like in 2021. I was looking back at my slides for Colleague Circles, and we did one of these a little less than a year ago and had Liz with us. So I'm very glad to be welcoming Liz Shapiro back from the Department of Economic and Community Development, State Historic Preservation Office, and the Office of the Arts. And she's with us to talk a little bit about what's going on at the state level and really help me facilitate a larger conversation and maybe field some of your specific questions about what reopening looks like this year. The landscape is pretty different with vaccination and the larger opening of the state with the new guidance from the governor. So I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. So before we get going on that, I just also want to remind you of one thing that we have coming up next week, which is the last of our spring workshops. We're going to be talking about fundraising during the pandemic and afterwards and what that looks like. We'll have some great guests with us, so you can sign up for that on our webpage. That's all I've got in terms of slides. So I want to hand things over to Liz Shapiro, who I know many of you know quite well. And Liz, go away and take it away.
Hi, everybody. Wow, I feel like it's old home day here. You can all turn on your cameras and I actually really will feel like it's old home day because, boy, this is a room that in which I feel very comfortable because it's so nice to see everybody's faces. So, for those of you who don't know me, I used to have Amherst's job with the CLHO, and I worked closely with Scott Wands in Connecticut Humanities. And then I was fortunate enough to be able to move over to work for the state of Connecticut 4 years ago. And in that capacity, I have this really long job title, which is Director of Arts Preservation and Museums for the Department of Economic and Community Development at the state of Connecticut. And that just means that I basically get, don't tell anybody this, but I basically kind of get to stick my finger in wherever or my nose, wherever I want to when there's arts and cultural things to talk about. But it also means that I do have I do get to get some inside information about things that are going on because often it does come out of the state. So I thought I'd start by just sharing a couple of things, talking about what the governor has in mind for May 19th and a little bit about consumer confidence. I put two links in the chat. I love the chat. So I put 2 links in the chat, and one is to the coronavirus business regulations portal. And then the other one is to Susie Wilkening's data stories. And I know many of you follow Susie Wilkening at Wilkening Consulting, and she's been doing lots of amazing surveys and creating all kinds of articles and also data pictures throughout the pandemic. And I thought this morning, I thought, oh, let me check and see what she has that's really new and interesting. And she always has things that are new and interesting. So that's the link to that information. As far as what seems to be happening right now, I did check this morning, and I think in Connecticut, we're up to about, I think it was 70, as of Friday, 71% of adults in Connecticut have had at least a first vaccine. And I think it's like 55% have had 2 vaccines. So Connecticut is rolling out its vaccines in a very efficacious way. Doesn't mean that everybody's getting them, but they are trying, and the state is trying to continue to do more and more in terms of vaccine rollout. I think based on everything that has been happening with the vaccines and with transmission and with the guidance from the CDC, the governor and his folks have decided that as of May 19th, the majority, and what they will say is all, and it's all with one exception, restrictions will be relaxed and released, will no longer be restrictions. And I think that that's somewhat of a conversation. People are like, well, is the law different? So when the restrictions are relaxed, whatever the relaxed restrictions are, that means that those things are no longer in effect against the law. it gets a little complicated during emergency times. But so what this means is that as of May 19th, unless something changes, the only requirement from the state of Connecticut is that when you are indoors, you wear a mask. So masks indoors is the only requirement. So that is what the Connecticut website says, what it means when it says the sector rules will disappear. The sector rules will disappear, with the exception of that one rule. Now, that said, the conversation has to definitely move along to talk about, well, what do people want and what do people expect and what are people ready for? And so I always think that's an interesting conversation, and that's why I shared Susie Wilkening's data stories. She has one that is indeed very recent. And in fact, people seem to be falling into three camps, and this is not surprising, right? And these are she mostly ends up speaking to people who are museum goers, but I think you do have to realize that some of her data comes from people who regularly attend cultural organizations and some does not. So when you look at it, really think about that. You know, some people are ready. They are primed and ready to leave their house once they are vaccinated. So that's a group of people. And then there's the second group of people who are waiting to see what happens. They are, in their heads, they are not quite ready to go out. So they will be moving very cautiously forward. And then there's this third group of people who don't want to go anywhere yet. They really are finding it challenging to reemerge, and rightly so. We have been very sequestered, you know, so it's very understandable that people could feel that way. So I think when we're talking about reopening, you know, that the bigger conversation is, who is your normal audience? So who's been missing you so much that they want to be coming back and using your facilities again? So that's the first question, because those are people who will probably come back. And you may have a sense of who those people are, right? They're the people who show up again and again. They come to your special events. They're, you know, volunteers. They're your members. They're the people who have been interacting with you on social media. So that's the first question. And then, of course, the next question is, I think, how much time, effort, and that to me always means money, right? Are you going to put into bringing people back, bringing people into your museum, right, into your space that may not feel comfortable, that may not have been there before, right? That's another question. And then, you know, we have been talking my entire career in museums, 30 plus years, we have been talking about who is your audience, right? Knowing who your audience are. And one of the questions that we always talk about is, oh yes, well, my audience is everyone. The world is my audience. But and I've always said, for those of you who know me, the world is not your main audience, right? You have a main audience. And I know as I'm looking around, just the people I can see at the screen, I'm thinking about the Leffingwell House. I mean, I'm looking at Cam, hi Cam, and I know she knows who comes to that museum, like she knows. And, you know, I know you all have a sense of who comes. And I think that really understanding what their confidence is absolutely critical. And we can talk about ways to do that. And I'm going to sort of open the conversation up, but I see that I have a question about what are the Hipaa privacy rules. And so figuring that would be a question, I actually reviewed what Hipaa privacy rules are and what they are looking like. And I will put another link, and it's from the University of Michigan School of Public Health. So I think it's a pretty astute link. And basically, you know, what they do is they look at the history of required vaccinations and what you can share and what you can't share. And if you look at the history, it's really, really interesting. But in terms of Hipaa, right, your nurse, this was the example that they give. If you're in a doctor's office and you just get vaccinated, the person who vaccinates you, let's say the nurse there, or the healthcare worker who vaccinates you, cannot take a social media picture of you and her saying, I just vaccinated this Liz Shapiro at this place at this time, or even just Liz Shapiro posted on social media, that is absolutely against HIPAA. But if Liz Shapiro, if I was one of the people, and I know a lot of people are doing this, right? You're putting on Facebook this picture of you with your vaccine card, right? And somebody else shares that, or if I post mine and Jamie Eves is like, oh, I was talking to somebody and I know Liz Shapiro got vaccinated because she put it on her Facebook post and I saw that. That's not a violation of HIPAA. So the HIPAA violation is really, it does not really pertain to you if you are not a healthcare provider. And that is my understanding of it. That said, I am not giving you legal advice because I am not a lawyer. So, I will cut and paste that in there as we're talking. And I guess I'd be happy to open to conversation, but I'm looking in the chat and hi, Lori from LaGrua. So there's an outdoor conference, no mask required unless it's free, but people have to sign up. Yeah, that's totally fine. So Lori, to me, first of all, you are allowed to do it. So that's the first thing. You can totally do that. And I think that what we're going to all find as we begin to reopen, and you probably have, some of you have been open for a while, some of you barely shut at all. And I think that would be an interesting thing to hear from people who were barely closed. I know Hildy, right? You guys were basically not closed. And I know there's others, and I know going back to CAM, they've been having events very carefully, and the Florence Griswold Museum has been open. People need to feel comfortable, and we need to understand that people need to feel comfortable. And we might screw up in the beginning, right? But I suspect that as the summer goes on and we're hitting into September and families and kids are gearing up to going back to what will be a relatively normal school year, if anything is relatively normal again, that there's just going to be, people are going to begin to just be much more relaxed being in public spaces with others. So, and I am absolutely not saying it's a good practice to ask to see vaccination cards. I would say that that is an organizational decision that you need to make. And if you make that decision, I would double check with your lawyers just to see if there's any legal ramifications for your particular organization. And you can always play it safe and play by your own rules. And that is your right. The vaccination question, when you ask to see somebody's public record, there is a ton, basically what this website says is people are still asked to see vaccination records. When you travel abroad, if you're going to certain countries, you have to show that you've been vaccinated against, malaria. I don't even know if it's malaria, but you know what I mean. So there's plenty of precedent for having to prove that you have been vaccinated. And as a private business, you're pretty much able to ask for whatever you want. But again, I would go to your lawyer and make sure that you understand what possible ramifications could come based on any of that. So, so that's where maybe I'll stop talking. I'll get that link in the chat.
That sounds great, Liz.
And then I'll just take questions.
Thank you. I know that while you're putting that link in, there's a question going back. Tiffany had asked, what are the rules for institutions who did not reopen during the pandemic thus far? Is there any recertification process that they would need to do after May 19th?
No, you can just open.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I think I think this question of vaccination is an interesting one. My personal thoughts on that is that I would not want to be asked for my vaccination card to go to a museum. I would find that intrusive personally. I know that a lot of people would not find that intrusive, but it seems to me to be something that organizations should think pretty carefully about, whether that's how you want to make people feel safe by asking them to share that fact about themselves and proof of it, or whether there are other things that you might want to do. And maybe we can have a conversation among the group about the sorts of different things people are thinking about doing to help people feel safe in that space, and also to open things up to people that isn't just based on their vaccination status. I think that gets into some tricky territory personally.
I can answer two questions that I've seen in terms of the rules being different for museum education rules. There's no difference. So summer camps, all of those things are reopening this summer, and they are reopening without state restrictions. Again, what I would say is think about what is going to make parents comfortable. Think about the kinds of experiences that kids have had in schools this, since the pandemic started. So, so in terms of working with kids, you might reach out, depending on where you are, to other organizations that have kids programs and just talk about as a group, what are you all going to be doing together? Because that might be a really great way to, on your website, just, really speak to the consumer confidence. Like, we're working with the local Y to keep your kids safe during, for the summer and their summer activities. I mean, to me, that would be like, oh, they must actually be having conversations about it. So I, as a parent, I was going to say a former parent, I'm still a parent. They're just grown up. But I would love to know that. And then I can happy to share about what we're doing at the State Museum. So Prudence Crandall will continue to be closed this summer because of renovations that we're doing there. Old Newgate and the Eric Sloan Museum are reopened. Old Newgate is, I believe, I'm going to tell you something and then I'm going to say, they are doing timed limited entry for the month of May, and will reassess in June to see if they feel that that is necessary. If you've been to Newgate, part of it is there's a mine tour. And so the mine tour is limited. And I think we decided that it was going to be limited to 8 people plus the guide. But you could be in different family groups, and in the mine, you do need to be masked. In any of the indoor spaces, you need to be masked, because indoors you still do need to be masked. So, so that's what we're doing there. The Henry Whitfield Museum, Eric Sloan Museum also is a similar space. It's a big cavernous space, and we're trying to do one-way traffic at inside the Eric Sloan Museum as much as possible, understanding that that's not always possible, but there is a way to sort of go in one way and around and out a different way, but then you do have to come back in to get into the very limited gift shop. Right now, the museums are opening with pretty limited gift shops. I suspect that's going to change too. Henry Whitfield Museum is a historic house museum, and you're pretty close together at different times. So that museum is opening the first weekend in June, and they will be, those tours will be, they will be guided tours as opposed, or I'm not right. There will be a limited number of people allowed in for timed entry, but the tour won't be guided. So you'll be in the house with given an overview of the experience by a staff person, and then you'll be allowed to explore in the house for up to 30 minutes, and then you'll be asked to move to the next space. The rest of the campus is pretty open. There will be one-way traffic through the visitor center. So we're not rushing, but Old Newgate actually did open in September of last summer. So they did try to reopen, and it was very successful. People said they really felt comfortable there. So should I look at the chat and read questions?
Yeah, we have a few more questions in the chat, and then I do want to kind of open it up to something a little bit more interactive, where we can get a conversation going, and not precluding any questions that people have. I'm sure that any questions people want to ask live are questions that others in this group have as well. So Camilla asks, should we still set up outside perimeters for events?
Cam, I think it's really up to you and what feels comfortable and safe. I think that's how I would answer it. It could be necessary. It depends, maybe the volume of visitors and if everyone's coming in at one time versus if they're all coming in to, sit down first and then something will start,
Yeah. Last year we set up a perimeter and it seemed to work very nicely because everyone came in one particular spot, and then at that point they could disperse within the area itself and walk around. And we kept masks going. We probably will try to keep masks as well outdoors this year because we have a tight space. We don't have a huge field.
Right.
We have a small field, And everyone was very good last year for the most part. But if someone insists on no mask, I'm not going to make them do it. You know, I'm just going to remind them that if they don't have a mask, please be careful of their distancing. You know, that's kind of the most we can do, I think, at this point. Near as I could tell from what I've read, it's again very confusing. Yes, you can all go out and do whatever you want, however, you know, and you got to figure out the however.
I think, well, one of the things I think we talked about this a year ago, is making it really clear to visitors what the expectation is going to be when they come onto your site, right? So, because it's like, you know, we don't want to embarrass anybody, and we're not trying to embarrass them, but sometimes people feel embarrassed because they don't know something and the expectation wasn't made clear, so they inadvertently broke a rule. I kind of think, when I think about this, when I think about my sites, I'm a little bit more concerned about what visitors will say to each other rather than the site rules, right? So the only way I can think of mitigating that is really putting the site rules and expectations in their faces as they come in to the site and on the websites and everything.
Yeah, so far we've kind of said, please wear a mask or bring a mask. And at this point, so we'll see what we have our first event this coming Saturday. So we'll find out what's going to happen this year. Last year it was fairly successful and everybody was very good about it. And you know, there was no issues. Everyone watched their distancing and their masks, and you know, our reenactions were wonderful. They were very, very considerate of everything. And so we'll see what happens. Inside tours have been interesting. People will show up. They tend to watch how close they are to other people and stay within a family unit if there's more groups in the museum. But so we haven't really had an issue. We're also trying to do timed entries with smaller groups, and it's cumbersome, but it works, you know.
Well, I think it speaks to the fact that we've, our regular museum goers, we've trained them pretty well, right? That there are some behavioral expectations, right? Like, I don't think anybody goes to a museum who's a usual museum goer who doesn't expect there to be a behavioral expectation. So in some ways, I guess that's a good thing. So,
Okay.
Thanks, Cam. Air quality. Air quality, I think we still want airflow. And when you're inside, you still are you're going to have visitors wearing masks still, unless that becomes no longer a thing. If you had to ask me what I thought about masks and how I feel, and I'm pretty, I've gone into, as soon as I was fully vaccinated, I've been inside and I've eaten in restaurants. Like, I feel like I'm one of those people who's like, let me go. And if I don't feel safe, I will leave. But most places I felt very safe. I think we're going to have masks. I wouldn't be surprised through the end of the year, the calendar year. And I suspect that is because of going back to school in the fall. And I think it's really hard to say indoor masks only at schools. And so I just have this gut, if I don't know, like, it seems easier to just stick with indoor masks in Connecticut through, Christmas to me. But that's just like, if I was running the world, that's what I would have people get used to, that idea of, at least through the end of the year. I mean, we do, the bottom line with historic houses is we do want airflow through them, right? Always. So, if you have no climate control in your historic house in the summer months and it gets humid, the suggestion is always that you think about where you can open doors and put fans strategically, doors and windows. There's always that risk of, bringing in pests and dust and all of those things, but stagnant air that doesn't move, that could get things moldy and create that kind of a situation, is really bad too. So, historic houses are tricky. It's always weighing the risk benefits. So I'm reading. Thank you for putting up the CDC guidelines. Yeah, okay. So I think, Susan, do you want to talk about getting slammed for your putting up your guidelines online in terms of vaccination guidelines? I'm not seeing you on.
Yes, I can talk about it. We post, we do blasts every week, and we post and we say everyone wears a mask, everyone uses hand sanitizer, because the railing inside our lighthouse, excuse me, sorry, the railing inside the lighthouse is rope. It's hemp rope, so there's no way to clean it. So we say everybody has to use the sanitizer, and we make that clear. People call from all over because they want to go inside a lighthouse, and we have we limit the group to one COVID pod of 4 people or less. But somebody on Google, it makes me so mad, because we work so hard to get a high rating, and someone came on and slammed us and said, I'm not putting these substances inside my body, and so I clicked on the person, and it turns out she had done the same thing for Cross Sound Ferry. She had wanted to go on a tour, and they wanted to see your card, I guess, before you got on the boat. And she also gave them a slam. And I think, I don't know, it's something to be aware of. You're sort of opening yourself up to what, in our case, I believe was only one review in that way, but you do see where people get organized, and they, so, maybe in a gathering like this, if we make people aware and something like that starts to happen, I don't know how we can defend against it, but it's just a good thing to have on your radar.
Thanks, Susan. It's helpful to hear sort of how it happens. And I think, so, the ways to get around that are by actually getting proactive about it, right? You've had the experience, so you haven't gotten around it. But if that is going to be a requirement, putting the reason why you are doing it and being very forthright right on your website landing page. And I know some of you have done that. I maybe all of you have done that. I haven't been to all of your landing pages, but I think that just saying that we believe, I mean, remember, we are repositories of public trust here. And there's, we have statements of belief, and saying that we believe, and this is why, can actually, I think it can actually stem some of that, because it just says, we're not irrational. We came to this discussion, we came to this decision as a group, and whatever it is that you're going to say, that's okay, but we believe this to be the right thing to do. So I think that's important. Has anybody else gotten slammed because of rules publicly?
Hey, Liz.
Yeah. Hey, Peter.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm late. I had a heck of a time trying to get on. It seemed determined that your site was completely.
Yeah, I sent out an email
hackers.
about that. I'm sorry. There's a certificate issue that with Wild Apricot that I have a security ticket in. So I'm really working to try and fix this, but I can't fix
That's
it
fine.
myself. And I don't actually think there's a security problem. It's
I
just,
don't think there is either, but I
okay.
couldn't get around it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm glad you made it, Peter. I'm
That's
sending an
fine.
email to somebody else right now about this too.
Yeah. At the Twain House, we've been dealing with this fairly regularly, but have had remarkably few complaints. And I've been talking to my directors roundtable, which is a group of directors from around New England, and they also have found remarkably few.
Oh, did he freeze?
We've lost you, Peter.
All right. I like that he froze on remarkably few.
Yeah.
Few is a good word when it is in terms of complaints, which is I think where he's going, but we'll get back on. Stay tuned, right? And I see that the question about, oh, there he is. Peter?
You back?
Maybe not. I see that there, the question about food and food service, and yeah, that's a tricky one, right? Because again, I think that has a lot to do with consumer confidence. But let's see. So that your local health department isn't, Tracy, your local health department isn't helping. They're not being very helpful about it. I'm not sure. Tracy, you might be talking, but.
Hi, no. Whoops, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not the one doing it. Somebody else is reaching out to them, and there's plenty of information about how to go about getting a, permit for an event, but there's not specific food handling answers that we have found online, to help guide us through the COVID situation.
So, I mean, what it was before essentially is that any food that you served had to be in enclosed packages. That's what it was. And I know this because back when we were writing the COVID guidance for like festivals and road races and things like that, that was the decision. So like you had to have a can of Coke or a bottle of water, not water fountains or not cups and water, and any snacks you had to be totally closed. So, maybe one way to move ahead is to just move ahead thinking, start with that kind of a thing, and then, sort of slowly go back into your normal activity. But but bottom line is, once these restrictions are lifted on May 19th, whatever you could do before, you could do, and it's really up to your local guidance, right, as to what they're going to allow you to do. Peter, are you back?
I am. Yeah, sorry, my home Wi-Fi occasionally dodges out.
You were just saying relatively few, and we were like excited about the few.
Yeah, it's been very, very few people that have caused a problem. And when they have, they usually make a pretty big stink about it. But we're just very polite about it and say, this is our site. This is what we believe. We followed the science. And we put signs all over the place that say, this is what we're doing. So when you walk in the door, and we are all timed tickets, although a few people walk in the door and manage to get a walk-in seat. They're all pretty well aware. We're very prominent about what our regulations are, and we are planning to have masks at least through the end of the year, although we're thinking that greater density and frequency of tours will happen throughout the season.
Yeah. I mean, and I would totally agree with that approach, and just thinking, okay, so for me, I like dates, and I think months, so, okay, so there's how I'm going to be in May, how I'm going to be in June, how I'm going to be in July. And of course, everything is subject to change, but if it's loosening, in theory, you can always go back to tightening it up, right? The loosening is easier. You just have to communicate it if you have to tighten things up. So no food inside. I mean, I think that's gonna kind of be up to you and consumer confidence, and I don't know, Alexia, if you're thinking about going back to tavern nights, is that what you're thinking? I don't know if you want to. Yeah,
that, and if we do it, it wouldn't be till next fall, but I'm just wondering, even an outdoor event with like an ice cream making thing in the summer, if that would be possible. And that's outside, so people aren't wearing masks. So, but then if we're making ice cream, I don't know if that's allowed. Our goal isn't to give everybody an individually wrapped, Dixie cup thing. But and if we do any hearth cooking in the fall, if people are wearing masks inside, they can't take them off to eat, I presume. And I don't know that I want them to. So I don't know.
yeah. So there's a lot to parse out. So one of the things is, can you make ice cream and give it to your visitors, right? So that's the first thing. That would be your local health district. I will tell you, in Sharon, Connecticut, when I was running my museum there, the first guy who had been doing the health inspection forever was like, didn't give a crap what we did. The next person who came in, though, was like, yeah, you're not doing any of this anymore. So we stopped a lot of what we were doing. So I think that's one thing. But even if your health department said it was okay, then I think there is a consumer confidence thing about, people making ice cream. I mean, I have a consumer confidence thing about eating ice cream that has been made at a museum outdoors when there's no COVID, right? I mean, I used to do apple cider pressing at the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown. And trust me, there are as many bee carcasses in that apple cider as anything else, because you can't make apple cider without bees. And so I kind of learned, yeah, I'm going to be careful about what I eat, you know, that's made outside at a museum. So but then the flip side is that people just, I think that there's a lot of people who just want normal, right? I really believe that. And I know bee carcasses are authentic, and I did eat quite a few of them. So.
It looks like Candy has a question, Liz.
Candy, what's your question? Hi, Candy.
Hello, Liz. It's such a good time to be able to see everyone, and your bee carcass is now going to be the thing of the day. You were talking about having people, visitors, show vaccination cards, etc. I just got the word today that Gillette Castle will be opening for tours on the 29th of May. So that's good, which means I can do my summer season of outdoor theater on site. And we've decided that we're going to do a radio show. So the actors aren't going to be walking off the stage or audience participation, which is what we anticipated doing last year and couldn't do. But I wanted to hear from you and others. I know I'm a slightly different situation because I'm not an employee of the stage or the castle. I am a outside vendor who is creating something. And because I own my own company, I can set my own rules. When I have the auditions for this season, I'm only going to be staffing the cast and the production team with people who can prove that they've been vaccinated. And I can do that without having any kind of issues because it's an independent contractor, it's not an employee, it's, you know, all that kind of stuff. However, I wanted to ask everybody, and Liz, if you've got some input in this, I do want to get a volunteer, an intern, and I like to use people who are 18 and over. But now it's getting into that gray area. If you're inviting people to volunteer, can I also do the mandate that I'm doing for the paid cast members and production team? Can I ask the volunteer that part of what will be a requisite of their getting the position is vaccination?
So again, I'm not a lawyer, but you're an independent company, and I believe that you can ask and require anything you want from the people who work for you. People. I think in this article the link that I shared, they were talking about flu shots, right? And certain hospitals, right? And people will require healthcare workers to get a flu shot. And one of the conversations sort of that is being had right now is, is the COVID shot going to be like a flu shot? So again, talk to a lawyer. I don't know if anybody else has made decisions about things like that.
Especially in the position of a volunteer.
Right, and you have to, if you're ready to have volunteers back.
Yeah, Peter, it sounds like you've got some experience having these discussions at Twain.
I just posted this as a question too, because one of the other interesting data points that came off of the Connecticut tourism thing is that visitors are 68% more likely to attend your site if the staff has been vaccinated and you make a point of showing it. And so we're talking about whether, because, it's a big controversy, do you make your staff get vaccinated? And so we're talking about whether we want public-facing staff to be required to be vaccinated for the next few months. Or alternately, there's another way around this, which I think might be the better and more clever way to do it, and that's to offer vaccinated-only tours. So we will say that if you want to register for a tour where the staff and everybody on the tour is vaccinated, that you can do that and hold one or two of those a day. And obviously, we're not going to check your vaccination status. If you say you are, we're going to accept your word for it. But that might be a way around that too. I am very sensitive to the fact that in some ways I do not want to be heavy-handed about requiring people to be vaccinated. On the other hand, I've got a staff that's all on 20% furlough right now. And getting back to a full visitation means that people can get back to a full salary. So it's kind of a greater good equation as far as the staff. What's better for the staff in the overall sense? And until I get back to a beggar visitation, I can't take them off the 20% furlough, including myself. So it's an interesting question.
Have you had this discussion, Peter, regarding volunteers or other people who aren't directly contractors, other people who aren't directly paid by Twain or directly employed by Twain?
This is only a question of paid staff at this point. Our principal volunteers are our wonderful garden volunteers, and they're all outside, and we let them do as they please. That's fine. But they're outside, so it's a little less of an issue.
Mhm.
Has
Yeah.
anybody else been having conversations around this that they'd like to share what you're thinking or other strategies? I mean, Peter's is really interesting around offering that as an option, but not a requirement. You know, if you want to elect to do it this way, we offer that option for you. I think that's kind of interesting. Are there other models people have come up with?
I was just going to say, I'm operating on a tiny, tiny scale with this, but we did just, the Jewish Historical Society decide to bring vaccinated volunteers back into the office because they haven't been able to come in to the building in the past year. And that hasn't been an issue. And Candy, I don't think there's no reason that you can't set that as a requirement for volunteers. It's just a matter of how people might respond to it, I suppose. But just as you can choose who you accept as a volunteer, just more or less the same way you can choose who you decide to hire. I don't think there's to me, there wouldn't be any strong differential between how you would approach the two questions.
If I can follow up with Peter, what about your historic interpreters, the actors who portray different characters in the house? Are you planning on relaunching those, and will you require those? I don't know how you guys work, whether it's an independent contractor or you staff them, W-2 staff with them, but how are you going to proceed with them?
Our first person interpretation are all paid staff. We have already been doing them. We started them up almost as soon as we reopened on April 10th. I think the following week we had first person tours going. They're wearing masks. It's, you know, obviously it's a little bit of an anachronism, but we're just going with it that way, and everybody seems to be fine with it.
And did you
Visitors
ask them
and staff alike.
Did you ask them to, like the rest of your administrative staff, have you asked those actor interpreters to be vaccinated as well?
You know, the interesting thing I found is that with a staff of 20 and roughly 40 people who are part-time, 20 full-timers and 40 part-timers, they're all proud of the fact that they're vaccinated. I've had almost nobody who hasn't proudly, we're not forcing anybody to say it. They're all saying, hey, I got my second shot or my first shot. It was a big deal. And so, you know, we've just sort of got it all as a matter of record. I think that's one of the advantages that we have, is that most of the people that work for us or volunteer for us are smart enough to know this is a good idea. So far it's worked out that way.
Yeah, and I just want to inject one thing into the conversation here, though, which is that there are people who are not going to be able to be
Yes.
vaccinated, right? And that this is another thing, or who may elect not to. And I just think it's important for us to be aware that in having a conversation about this, you're thinking about a group of people who may not be able to be vaccinated or who may choose for whatever reason not to be, and that you're okay with, if you have a policy of requiring vaccination, that you're okay with excluding all of those people. So I think that that's why, you know, Cam's question about social distancing and those other kinds of protocols, which are other ways to make people feel safe, are also really important in this conversation, because I don't think that vaccination is going to be like it's not a silver bullet
But
for all of
it
this,
is interesting.
you know?
I mean, bringing that up, Amherst, and this is kind of, I don't want to get off topic, but, you know, again, you know, the idea of discriminating by not letting people in who haven't been vaccinated or something like that, whatever your policy is, you know, I think it really forces organizations to confront the issue of what is discriminatory practice and what is your belief system.
Or is it just
right?
good public health?
Or is it just good public health? So, I mean, there's so many nuances to this discussion.
There are, and I, you know, sometimes I think we're bending over backwards for a few people, and at the same time, I do have to look at the larger good of a site that, when it's fully staffed and visited, has 70,000 people a year going through it. And we've made the decision that we're not requiring people to be vaccinated in order to work there. But there may be certain classifications, like our historic interpreters, where we do say, and we haven't made any decisions on that. So this is all completely up in the air at this point.
The one thing I have to say this, because, you know, Peter and I, we've known each other for a long time, but I keep thinking about this not requiring proof of vaccination for people who sign up for vaccine tours. And honestly, so my mind just goes directly to like, you know, there's been, you know what's happening in Connecticut in terms of vaccination, right? And so there's a very, very, you know, however you feel, that there is a very, very vocal group of people about who are, you know, who have been making their views about vaccines known. And I could just see, honestly, I really could see somebody signing up for your vaccine, you know, vaccination required tours without asking for proof, and then going out on social media because they're pissed at you and saying, I went on a tour, and then you got to deal with that public, you know, confidence issue. So
yeah,
I don't know, like, you know, there's very few bad actors. I really believe that, but some are. I wouldn't spend a lot of time worrying about it, but just
we've decided not to spend a lot of time worrying about it. And as far as the staff, if we made some decision about requiring vaccinations for certain classes of staff, I think we would also make it clear we weren't laying anybody off. It's just you couldn't work there for now until we got to, and we would establish a bright line limit about where transmissibility was when we were comfortable about having non-vaccinated staff still. And we're probably not very far away from that right now anyway. So, but I don't think we'll probably go there. And we're certainly not going to require visitors to tell us whether they're vaccinated or not.
Yeah. I would note that Chelsea put up an interesting link from Garrison Law about Connecticut employers. Can Connecticut employees be required to get a COVID-19 vaccination? It's a quick one. It doesn't give a lot of answers because it's from a lawyer and they're never going to actually tell you what you want to know. So they equivocate a lot, but it all goes into the mix of having conversations. There's a great question about docents being reluctant to come back.
Yeah, I want to get to that one. And there's also one that I think got lost in the mix about food trucks for an outdoor event.
Right, I did see that. So food trucks are subject to their own, you know, they have licensing requirements and public health inspections just the same as restaurants are. So once a food truck comes to you, you don't have to worry about it. Just make sure that their licensing is up to date. You know, the responsibility is removed. So food trucks can be a good way of providing a food experience on site. And we actually try to do that at our state museums.
So, this larger question about docents and volunteers, especially in bringing them back to their site, Beth has already talked about what they've been doing at the Jewish Historical Society of Greater Hartford and sort of bringing vaccinated volunteers back. Does anybody else have other experiences that they want to share? Has there been a general hesitancy to return, or are people excited to get back to what they were doing?
Amherst, this is David.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is David Rao from the Florence Griswold Museum, and we reopened last June, with very obvious protocols for visitors and for staff and for our volunteers. We just really kept in touch. We have a pool of about 75 docents who keep the house running, and we were super. We kept in touch with them nonstop, and we kept asking and doing check-ins and with surveys, just asking about comfort level of returning. What was it that we would need to do to make them comfortable? And we didn't have a full staff of docents, and so we hired house monitors. We actually hired part-time people to do what the docents do, basically keep the house open, count the number of people, and we had like one-way directions through the house, pretty obvious with arrows. And then we just kept asking the docents, and every survey that went out, more and more either felt comfortable or felt comfortable with the rules. And so we just dovetailed, or we brought on as many docents as we could, with letting know all the other docents that they were always welcome back and we weren't going to pressure them. But now during this vaccination stage, we've really watched the docents almost, I just sent a survey out last week and the comfort level is much higher. For two things. A, they're all vaccinated. They think most of the museum visitors are vaccinated, and we're still keeping a lot of our protocols. We're keeping our numbers at the same level. We're not opening up crazy. We're going to do everything incrementally, and we're constantly in contact with the docents saying that their health as well as the staff health is of high priority. But they're dying to come back. I mean, they're so eager to come back, and so the docents need to be masked and they need to kind of be socially distant, and they really are the maitre d's down there, kind of making sure that folks are playing by the rules. And so far, so good. So I think if, we've also put in a lot of cleaning protocols that the docents see. And so I think that's another, if they really see the museum is doing everything in their power to keep them safe, the confidence level, incrementally goes up, if that's of any help at all. But yeah, and docents, when they finally do come back, they are just tickled pink because they've missed the place so much. However, we are also doing some retraining because they feel like they've been away for a year and they've gotten rusty. So, I mean, even today we're hosting a virtual tour for all of our docents just to kind of get reacquainted with the core story. I hope that helps.
That's great, David. Thank you so much. Are there other folks who want to weigh in on the questions of volunteers and docents before we have a couple more questions that have come in on the chat as well that I want to see if we can get to before we come back. John at the Shoreline Trolley Museum says that they have a large number of out-of-state volunteers, and those are much more hesitant to return than those who live in state, which, given all of the restrictions on our movements in the past year, makes a certain amount of sense to me, John. There's a question from Lori about what organizations are doing after May 19th regarding in-person sit-down lecture type events. Masking, what do you think people are going to be comfortable with in terms of how close they want to sit to another party? It looks like Cam's got something to say on this.
We decided to keep all of our lectures outside again. We're doing everything outdoors in the garden. We have a speaker system. Whoever's talking stays in the garden and everybody else goes around outside. They can find a chair, sit on the ground, and maintain distancing. It worked very well. And we were able to obviously talk to a lot more people instead of the usual 20 indoors. And it was very comfortable. So we decided to do that this year with all of our lectures and our presentations. We're just going to stay outside. It worked very well for us overall.
Not an option for us, but I'm glad it's working for Leffingwell. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
Yeah. We've been doing online lectures and presentations now for it's over a year now, and they have become just rock solid. We're getting far larger audiences online than we ever did in person. And although we're looking forward to maybe going back in person, We're thinking that this is a long-term thing. And eventually we want to put together the technology, which is going to be expensive, to make it hybrid. It's what we've been able to do online is fantastic. And so, no, we're not rushing back to do it. The problem is that we used to be able to charge for it when it was in person, and nobody wants to pay a darn thing for it online. So.
Yeah, Hildy, do you want to share a bit about what you're doing at Killer Tavern in terms of lectures and things like that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. We were open because we have a 4-acre campus and 4 historic architecturally significant buildings. So we did a lot of outdoor guided experiences, which we're continuing to do it. Everything is online, pre-registered. We're going to continue that. Masks are mandatory, continue that. So the town of Ridgefield has a lot of arts and cultural institutions. So we have all along worked together as a unit to sort of send out on the messaging side, because it's like a destination. You know, Ridgefield is the first town also to receive the cultural district designation. So we want to make sure that when people come, it's not, you know, they go to us, they go to the Aldrich someplace else and everything is different. So we sort of teed it all up, but we're very much still masked, small groups, distancing. The museum, we're going to open up inside tours in June. That's going to be all pre-registered, one-way flow, et cetera, et cetera. Our docents and all the staff has been vaccinated. Docents who are vaccinated are coming back. And we're just opening up our VSA position that's in the visitors center. And it's really, you know, I'm just mandating people have to be vaccinated for staff. I mean, if we pay them, you're vaccinated. So, and on the volunteer, I have yet to see a volunteer who clearly says, oh, I don't want to get vaccinated. You know, all our volunteers are vaccinated. So we're pretty much continuing what we did last year in terms of bringing people here. And I also put in some links for, we're getting a grant to get air purifiers. So, you know, our historic tavern is air conditioned, but it's an ancient, you know, sort of a rickety system. So we're putting in really high quality air purifiers. And that's a great grant. People love giving you money for that sort of thing. So.
That's great. Yeah. And Lori, I don't know if we've answered your question, because it sounds like you're you're going to be doing an in-person, you know, like
our board is really
event.
pressing for that to go back in person in June, but I don't think people want to sit shoulder to shoulder, and we don't want to be 6 feet apart. So maybe it's 1 or 2 chairs or 3.
Lori, you know what people seem to be doing is coming in. I can talk on the art side of things, right? Who have theaters. So what they seem to be doing is, you know, groups come in together. So if it's your 2, there's a seat, and then there's, you know, 4, and you kind of let people, you know, you can let people do it a little bit by themselves.
Okay.
And if you can move, if they're mobile chairs, which seems to be what you're saying.
We do.
Yeah. Then they, you know, as long as you can, I would say, you know, keep an egress, right? Or two egress areas clearly marked. Then having people, you know, be able to move their chairs as needed with either suggest, you know, you set it up in a suggested way, them around. I know that's not like what we normally do, but it's real. But it was going to take a few, like, you're going to have to sort of figure it out first and say, okay, this one is maybe limited to 40. And then at 40, you could be like, oh, we could do a lot more people than that, you know.
I think that's the thing, is our capacity, and yeah, it's guessing. And I think, as you said earlier on, yeah, we might screw it up. And I've put out communication, you know, please be patient with us, kind hearts, patience, and we're going to adjust as we go, but we're going to be very cautious at first and err on the side of caution. But it's hard to kind of do what my colleague and I think are correct. And the board often has a different idea. So this is very helpful to hear what peers are doing.
We just had a couple of quick questions here before we go. I don't know, Alexia is asking, you know, what folks are planning to do for Open Museum Day on June 12th. I'm thinking maybe we should have another colleague circle where we can talk about this. But does anyone have anything they want to share immediately in response to Alexia's question? Cam. Oh,
Let me
and
do
is
it
it?
again. We're gonna open up a new museum in town, believe it or not. We actually have another one to open. We didn't close anything, we opened another. We're gonna have it open on Connecticut Open House Day for visits. And it's gonna be in person, but we're gonna have to limit the number of people going in at a time. And but that's what we plan to do with one place. The museum, I think we're gonna open with a small discount in admission, and it's up to Dane if he wants to do a virtual or not. He's not sure. I'll leave that up to him. So we're gonna try all three. We're gonna go for two, but maybe for three, you know.
Great. And Mark had a question about a program which Liz may be able to speak a little bit more about, although I know this is still in process. What's the status of Connecticut paying for youth admissions this summer? Is that something that's going to happen?
So yeah, I'm happy to answer that question, even though it's going to be kind of a non-answer. So what is going to happen is, so the governor has proposed to the legislature that one of the uses of the money that is coming from the American Rescue Plan is to allow Connecticut museums to be open free to kids with one accompanying adult between July 1st and Labor Day, which is September 6th this year. And so the way this is going to work is it's a little tricky to get there. So the program can't become a reality until the state legislature adopts the governor's recommendations. And that probably won't happen until very close to the end of the legislative session, which is the beginning of June 9th, I think, this year. So because we can't run a program that starts, you know, that from soup to nuts and have it be ready to go by July 1st, what is going to happen is that this Friday, at some point during the day, and there will be applications open to apply to for a grant program that is going to be associated with kids, Connecticut Museums, Kids Are Free Summer. That's kind of what we're calling it. It's very catchy, I know. We will have the applications hopefully open for 2 weeks. What we are not going to, and there's going to be applications for organizations, 2 different applications. They are going to be identical, but depending on your budget size, you will apply either to Connecticut Humanities or to the Connecticut Office of the Arts. So I am the Connecticut Office of the Arts, and Scott Wands, I think you all know Scott, and Jason Mancini are Connecticut Humanities. Smaller organizations with a smaller budget size and are going to be applying to Connecticut Humanities. We just haven't quite figured out what the cutoff is going to be. The application is not going to be difficult, but what it is going to require, and this is up on our website and is also on Connecticut Humanities, is that you do have a sense of your visitation. Numbers from 2019, if you were open in 2019. If you were not, you can look at 2018 numbers. Especially during the period of July 1st through Labor Day, which I think was September 3rd in 2019, and what the revenue is from that. So we're going to be asking you those questions. We're also going to be asking you to either tell us, and some of you will have to guesstimate, we know that, the number of Connecticut attendees versus non-Connecticut attendees, and the number of kids versus adult, which some of you will probably be collecting that information. The questions, all the rest of the questions are going to be sort of typical grant information about you. You'll have to upload a budget. You're going to have to know what your operating expenses and your operating revenue were for 2019, 2020, and projected for 2021, no matter what your fiscal year is, you can define that. But what we're not going to know until we have all the applications in is how much funding any organization is going to get. And I will tell you why. We have a lot. We have about $5 million to give out. That's a lot. We've already figured out how to have the 5 biggest visitor organizations in the state participate in the program, and that would be the 2 aquariums, the zoo, the Connecticut Science Center, and Mystic Seaport. What is trickier to get at, because there is no place that we collect this data regularly, is what is the correspondence between an organization's budget size and their visitation, particularly for children. And I think just some, those of you who run historical societies know that you're probably getting fewer children than, let's say, the zoo, right? Also a nonprofit organization. And children's museums get a lot of children's visitors, right? But, let's say like the Greenwich Historical Society gets fewer child visitors. They have quite a large, over $1 million budget. So in quick surveys, there was no correlation that we could make between organizational budget and visitorship, and especially visitorship of children. So what we're going to be doing is collecting all the applicants, all the applications, creating a big data set. We want anyone who wants to participate in this program to feel that they're going to be whole, right? That they're not going to lose tons of money by participating. And so I have economists here at DECD that is going to take the data from Connecticut Humanities and our application, which are identical, it's just the budget size. And we're going to create what's called a data flow. So, we have the amount of money we can give away. We know what the hit is going to be for organizations who are collecting their visitation statistics. And that's how we're going to come up with your grant fund. So with luck, we will have all of these in. We'll be able to review them. Once you're in, as long as you have children visitors, you will be eligible, right? And then I don't think that there'd be a reason that you would be eliminated, ineligible, only if you're not a museum, and we're defining what a museum is. The issue is this is going to be a short turnaround, right? So that's one piece. You will not get your money before the end of July, but you will get it all at once. That is currently the plan. It could be you would get it in August, because we just have to, it takes a while with the state funds. Like we have to transfer it from one place to the other. We have to enter into grant contracts with all of you. There will be a final report. So it means if you participate by getting funded, you will be asked to submit a final report, which means you'll have to track your visitors. Okay, many of you do that, some of you don't. There is a path to participation without applying for a grant. So if you decide this is way too much for me, I get 100 kids and they're free, I don't need to participate, it's not worth getting zero money basically, you will be able to sign up for this program and participate and be on the websites and be part of whatever press comes out without applying for a grant. So there's no bar, you can participate no matter what. So maybe that's more information than you expected me to say when I said I had no information, but this is a bit of a moving target for us, and here's fun, it's really fun to work for the state. That's all I can tell you. It's a whole different world of fun. And thank you, Laura, and I will also say that there is a possibility that the legislature will not approve it. So you could all apply, we could review all your stuff, and the legislature could not approve it, and then we're done. So I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, the governor really wants this to happen. So at any rate, we will Amherst will announce, we'll announce, Connecticut Humanities will announce. We expect it to be live by the end of the day on Friday. You will have a minimum of 2 weeks. We may be able to get you 3 weeks, but like I said, get the stuff together about visitation now. That's going to be the hardest stuff.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your excellent questions and for being here and being willing to share your own experiences and what you've been doing. I know this has been a really valuable conversation for everyone. Mary Lee has sort of, kind of wants to get a a thread started on email around this. So I might just send an email to everybody who participated in this colleague circle. And if you have follow-up questions, you can ask one another if everyone's comfortable with that mode of contact. I'm happy to, you can just drop yourself off if you're not interested. But I want to thank you all for being here. I look forward to seeing you at a future League program. Good luck with all of your plans. And if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. We can always, rope Liz into another another one of these if we need to more consultation from her. But I'm happy to help facilitate conversation among League members and across the history community. So thank you for being there, and good luck.
Thank you, Amherst. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you
Bye.
again, Liz, for being here.
Sure, my pleasure. Okay, bye guys.
Bye all.